All right, welcome everyone. We like to give a couple minutes of grace time. So we will have a fun activity to get you all started. So if you want to take a look at this image here, at the Mira Fellowship, we're very interested in seeing things from the different perspectives. So this is either a really zoomed in, or actually I'll give you a hint. It is a really zoomed in picture of something. And I'd love to hear guesses of what it might be. And Dart, you have a different name right now, so if you could change it just so that they know who you are. And I'd love to hear thoughts in the chat. What this might be. A sea urchin. I like it. A matcha whisk. Looks like a seed. A hairbrush. These are all great ideas. Dandelion puff. Porcupine. A star. I love this. All right, we'll do one more minute. If anybody has any other guesses, get them in before we do the big reveal. Seed of a clingy weed. I like the specificity there. Any other thoughts? Any final thoughts before we close? All right, some of you all were close. This was, in fact, a seed of a clingy weed. It is a burr. I was running a little class with my daughter and some of her friends, and we were learning about how Velcro was discovered. And this is a close-up picture of a burr. So welcome, everyone. We have numerous more people signed up, but in the interest of respecting all of your time, we're going to go ahead and get started tonight. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to what the Mira Fellowship is. And then we're going to spend most of the time hearing from some of our amazing, what we call Forever Fellows. So, or actually one current fellow and some Forever Fellows to give you some insight into what it is to be a Mira Fellow. So I will have a couple of questions for them to start with, and then we'll spend the majority of the time answering your questions about the fellowship. So just imagining a lot of you are familiar with what the fellowship is, but essentially, the mission of the Mira Fellowship is to build a more compassionate future, one bold idea at a time. And we do this by creating it's essentially like a customized social incubator for visionaries who are ready to build their life's work. So we have a variety of different components. One is we have a toolbox for change. So we help each individual move from framing their idea to prototyping their idea to community building and finally to storytelling, essentially getting their story or their idea ready for whatever the next step is. For some, it's seed funding. For some, it's launching a book. For some, it's launching a movement. Whatever the next step is we are agnostic with that, but we like to get people to a place where their idea is really clear and really joinable. We have an amazing community that you'll get to see a little bit of it, but that provides a ton of support for folks in their journey as a social entrepreneur or a social innovator. Doesn't have to be entrepreneur. And then we provide customized support, so we can provide coaching, summits that are curriculum focused, micro grants, warm introductions to our network of investors and donors when you get to a point where you are ready. And Dart, who is one of our past fellows here, is quoted as saying, "Mira is my people." We definitely find that we're very focused on creating a strong community because changing the world is hard, and getting your own idea out into the world is extremely hard, and we want everyone to feel like they have the support that they need to make it happen. So what we're looking for in terms of fellows, we're looking for somebody who is tackling something big and bold, somebody whose idea, if brought to fruition could really change the world. We're looking for people who are deeply committed to their idea, ready to dive in and make it happen. And we're looking for people who are collaborative by nature. So people who are ready to give back to this community, because this community grows stronger each year with all of the amazing folks that we have as a part of it. So with that, I am going to stop sharing and give you all an opportunity to meet our amazing fellows. And essentially what they're going to do is we're going to go through 2 rounds where I ask questions, and then we'll jump in and give you all a chance to ask more questions. So the first question, what I'd love each of you to do, Lynn, Blaine, and Dart, is to start out by telling the group what is your big idea. So what's the thing that you are reframing, and what was one of the most valuable components of the Mira Fellowship to you? And maybe we'll go Lynn, Blaine, and then Dart.
Thanks, Kyle. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all here, especially for a session around a fellowship that has meant so much to me and to so many others. So my project that I incubated with the Mira Fellowship is called the Money Health Collective. The work that we have focused on is how do we take something that typically is so focused on the individual and make it community-based. So the focus is on financial health and well-being. How do we turn it from something where it feels like it's something that people have to navigate alone to something that people can navigate with community, integrating not only the more technical aspects of finance, but also a lot of the emotional and behavioral aspects of what it means to be financially well. So it's been a real privilege to get a chance to explore this in collaboration with this beautiful Mira Fellowship community, and that's been the inspiration for a lot of the way that the community is built. I'll pass it next to Blaine.
Can you tell us a little? No, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Blaine.
Happy to chime in. Yeah, and echoing the welcome and excitement to see so many folks on the call and think about all of the ideas that are in y'all's head ready to come into the world. So yeah, my name is Blaine Johnson. I've been working on an effort that thus far we're calling Encore Public Service Partners. But the project is focused on fixing the US Congress by leveraging retiring members of Congress differently. So the reframe that I've been thinking about is perhaps in contrast to some popular sentiment about Congress being the worst in a lot of ways, and Congress people being a group, former members of Congress being a group of people that doesn't need any help, reframing that cohort as a group of people who actually still have a lot to give, if only we can support them to find opportunities for continued public service in their encore careers. And one of the things that's been most valuable to be a part of a Mira Fellow as I've been trying to do this is the feedback loop that I have with my coaches and also my fellows in the fellowship. I think building alongside other people who are all trying to bring something new into the world for the first time has been really helpful to have that community of builders. Let me pass the mic to Dart.
Awesome, thank you. Dart, you are muted.
You know, I don't use Zoom. Such a rookie mistake. So I'm after a world in which every single company is an engine for building and delivering work to people that makes them feel whole and alive. And so the big reframe here is that for the last 100 years, companies have framed people at work as inputs to production. So essentially things that need to be optimized. And so the reframe is people at work are actually customers. They're working customers. And that means that work is therefore a product. And so everything that I'm about is about bringing product design discipline to how companies build and deliver work to the people who work there. And so the The biggest thing, there are a couple big things that I've got to say that Mira brought to me. Absolutely community. Others have mentioned. I started a company with the help of Mira, which is now 7 people. And we deliver work design services. We teach companies how to build happy work. That's the way we say it. And actually, just being able to say that as easily as I just did, we teach companies how to build happy work. Took a lot of practice that Mira helped with. But there's a deeper thing that Mira did for me, which is the biggest obstacles for many of us between doing the big idea that we're after is not the world, it's in us. And it's our fears and how we might have scoped ourselves in the world. And so taking some time to examine those fears and to challenge those fears to knock down walls between us and what we're after was super important for me.
Awesome. Thank you all 3. So I'm going to ask you one more question. You get to choose your own adventure here. What was either the most surprising, the most challenging, or the most intimidating part of the fellowship? And we'll go in the same order.
Should I go? I feel like I'm always moved whenever I hear Dart talk. Maybe because he runs a podcast that asks you about your next intellectual frontier. So,
The microphone.
I think the part that has been, the part that I've been the most surprised by, that I've been so grateful for, and maybe the part that I've been intimidated by most, is that the question, Carl? Just to make sure that I got that right.
Yeah, it's one of those 3. So most surprising, most challenging, or most intimidating, or a combination
of
thereof.
I think maybe the most, surprising first is I don't think that I anticipated when I first got involved with the Mira Fellowship that it would be something that I would stay part of for all these years. So as Blaine mentioned, she's one of our current fellows this year. I joined the fellowship back in during COVID, I believe it was 2020 to 2021 when I met Ko, and I saw Kai just joined the call too. When I first met this wonderful group of people, and I anticipated, being involved for this year while I was in this process of redesigning my own journey, and then found the community so beautiful that I still got a chance to, even today, not only continue to work on collaborating and building the Money Health Collective together, but also continue giving back in a way that is so meaningful. And now being in a position where I actually get to coach a fellow myself has been surprising and such a wonderful part of this journey. And now solve another problem in support of him and the work that he's doing to solve homelessness, for example. So it's the way that we grow, the way that the community has helped me grow, and the way that I've been able to support the growth of the Mira Fellowship community has been something that I've been very, very grateful for. And I imagine in terms of the question of maybe challenging and intimidating, I have found, just like if you look into the bios of a lot of the other fellows before you get a chance to meet them, you find a lot of people who've done really incredible work for a long period of time. And sometimes if you just read their bios on their own, it's kind of intimidating. Like we've had people who've done really incredible work internationally, who have a huge footprint professionally, yet when we're in the space, we're like a family, like a real community. And so I think it's both surprising, but also sometimes can feel intimidating before you get to know everybody. And then when you do, it just feels like, you're hanging out with a long lost friend that you've always wanted to collaborate with and learn from.
Awesome. Thank you, Lynn. Blaine.
Back to Blaine.
And echo many of those sentiments. Let me, I guess, just try to add one thing. In general, a challenging part of the work is we're trying to bring something new into the world, and that new thing could take any form. And as you try to make it real, you have to figure out what you need in order to make it real. And that is still a piece of work that you can engage with your coach. But I think that's one of the things that I've experienced just as a challenge as a founder in this space of like figuring out what it is that I need. Because that's the only way that you can get that support, right, is by figuring that out. And through that process, I've gotten some really great feedback. I think one of the things that's been really wonderful and surprising from my original starting point, being part of the fellowship, is how my coaches and the team have helped me refine my thinking on what the beachhead for my project is. I mean, the US Congress is not exactly the most accessible institution, and former members of Congress are not exactly the easiest people to meet. And so thinking about who are the people that I can approach first, and what is the model or the minimum viable product, so to speak, that I can use to engage which nearer group of people. The Mira Fellowship, at least in my cohort, has been really big on prototypes and experimenting to really get new information and feedback in that way. And I think that's been, a really helpful model for me to take something theoretical and test its possibility to be real in the world. Over to you, Dart.
Awesome, thanks.
There were probably a lot of different times along the way where I was surprised or challenged or intimidated. I don't want to give away some of the exercises, so I'm going to not give those things away. But I'd say I'm in a challenging moment right now. There's a way in which I've gotten myself in over my head. I haven't run a company before. Now I have a company. I have 2 companies now. I have 7 people in the company. We're drafting contracts. And I think if I hadn't I know from experience that if I get in over my head, I always figure out a way to get back up and out of it in a good way. But Mira helped me, definitely enabled me to get in pretty deep in over my head in starting this company. It's not a horrible thing at all, but it's definitely kind of challenging. It's a good word.
Awesome. Well, thank you each for your responses. Now I'd love to open it up to you all as the audience. So if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or type it in the chat or whatever it will be. We have a good 40 minutes here or 35 minutes to answer as many questions as we can to help you all understand what the experience might be like.
Hi, my name is Elise. I'm curious about what type of projects are seen as viable projects for the fellowship versus those that are probably outside of the scope.
That's a great question. I will take a first cut at that, and Kai or any of the fellows, if you want to piggyback on anything I say, please feel free. We are pretty broad in terms of the kinds of projects that we accept. We're kind of like across industries, across focus areas. I think the biggest thing for us is that it is a project that that you are deeply committed to, and a project that if it gets to go to its full fruition, it can really change how the world works in some way. That and I guess the last thing is that it is something that is new, that it's not, taking something that's been done and kind of just doing it again. Well, it's really trying to push the limit of what's possible in the world. Kai, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think that we like things. We want people who are super engaged and sort of doing their life work, and I think that's the most important thing. And then secondly, I would say it's the paradigm shift. The more that you're sort of pushing upstream of what that problem is and coming up with a new paradigm that might change how it all could work, that's the thing that excite us the most, because I think those are the highest leverage points for something like this, where it's one person with a lot of commitment, rather than just I need to raise a bunch of money to make something that's already happened happen.
Anything, fellows, to add to that one? that may or may not be a real fellow question. But
I have something that I think might come to mind for people, which
Great.
is that almost everybody at some point asks the question, am I the right person to do this? I have this idea, why am I the person to do this? And so having that doubt is one thing that just to know it doesn't rule anybody out, because everybody feels that way at some point.
absolutely. Lila, I saw your hand going.
Yeah, thanks. I'm on my phone, and so it's like, do I know how to unmute myself? I figured it out, obviously, but I'm just curious, how far developed does the idea have to be? Like, do we have to already be implementing it, or can it just be like a big dream that we want to try to tackle? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So this is another one. A lot of these questions were pretty much like, well, it depends. And this one is similar too. You definitely do not have to have it be already implementing. It is fine if it is. I think the big thing that in terms of it being in the right place is that it's in a place where you are both committed to it and kind of grappling, like working through a big question. So we have had somebody who was, running a very successful organization for 10 years, but they were looking at kind of how do they move it to the next place. And that we're fine with. The majority, though, are more on the side of, having a brand new idea that maybe isn't even in the place where where it's so good, but it's hard for you to explain it in a way. And that's why a lot of our curriculum is focused on that framing, getting prototyping and community building and storytelling to like get things super clear. So we are open to really, really early stage ideas in the sort of social venture world, which not everybody is in, who is in part of the Mira Fellowship, but we think of ourselves as like, before your very first like pre-seed investment, like getting yourself ready to begin to pitch. You don't have to be pitching to investors. That doesn't have to be a part of it, but yeah, so it's pretty across the board. Kai, would you add anything to that?
I would just say the commitment is a big thing. We've had some people come through and they're still sort of figuring out if they really want to do it or not. And that's not a good use of all of our time. And so I think that the how you do it can change, but the sort of what we try to focus on is having a North Star for what it is that you really want to do, and some experience doing that, or if you don't have experience doing that yet, then go and do something that shows that you have the commitment to it. Because sometimes people from the outside can do great things, but I think it's really that. It's not a place to sort of just figure out if you want to do it or not, or try something out. It's a place to start doing the thing that's really exciting to you.
And I'll build on that because I see another question, is a proof of concept required? And I'd say similar, like, no, it is not. Like, you don't have to have like, I have implemented it with this many people and it's been successful. I think we do like to see some like proof of taking steps forward. Like you've already talked to these people and learned this and you're moving this around. We have certainly had people who have come in and made a pretty big pivot once they're here. So if you come in and you're like, I think it's this, and by doing research and talking to people and kind of seeing, like stepping back, doing all the different kind of activities we have you do, you realize like, whoa, I thought it was this and it's actually over here. That's 100% fine. But as Kai said, being really clear on like what that North Star is and like it's like we want you to be clear on what the 25-year vision is, but the like how to get there is something that we like to help people. But we're kind of designed to help people figure out some of that if that's where you happen to be. Can you say a little more to this question? How does Mira support fellows in maintaining the legal distinction between exploration and employment? Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're wanting to learn with that question?
Yeah, it's my question. So just want to understand, I'm on my H-1B right now, which is work visa. So I'm able to do research or I can do exploration, but I can't be involved in a task where it's treated as employment. So I want to understand how Mira treats the fellowship program. Is it like exploration program? Is it an employment program, or is it a crossover? How does Mira operate within this space?
Yeah, I mean, I think in that case, we'd want to look at kind of there would be the specifics of your idea and like thinking longer term, because we definitely want folks who are interested in doing their work to a point where it becomes whatever kind of the bigger impact is. It is not an employment. We don't provide enough money for it to be an employment. It's more of like a community of support. So I think in terms of like a conflict of interest, I don't think that I would be concerned about that. In that, from a like, if you were participating as a fellow, I don't think that would make it so you couldn't be employed at your current place.
While I'm at it, can I also ask another question?
Sure.
Sure. How does Mira Fellowship operate with the IPs that comes out of our projects?
Great question. So we do the intent of all of it is that all of your IP does remain yours. We do have you we have you sign something that says you're okay with us talking about your idea, attributing it as a Mira Fellow, that kind of stuff. We have had people come through on different levels. We're pretty flexible with the IP. We do just want to make sure that it's not, if you create something great, we don't have to, every time we want to share about it, that we don't have to check in with you, because it is important for our own, for the organization to be able to talk about the fellows and what the fellows do. That being said, we have had some people who are working on some controversial stuff to start with. So we did not talk about their stuff until it got to a more public place. That's 100% fine. And we don't own any of it. So if you create some amazing technology, we don't take any percentage of it or anything like that. Mark.
Hey, I'm a bit curious about whether the Miro Fellowship is geographically constrained in terms of the solution. I'm based out of the Bay Area, but the knots that I'm working on is in Africa.
No, absolutely not geographically constrained in any way. We've had fellows from all around the world in terms of where you're working. That's 100% fine to be in all different places. Okay, so I would love to hear from each of the panelists on breakthrough/aha paradigm shift conversation that they had with another fellow, alumni, mentor, etc. I like this question. Blaine, you want to kick us off?
I've got one. Yeah, it's a sort of a recent one. So this whole time, Kenny, I have been thinking about the sort of the private sector model where private sector leaders who've decided to leave their current C-suite position or the firm that they work for are often given by those firms a few months of paid time to figure out their next step. They get introductions, they get help with resumes, they get conversations with career coaches, thinking about what kind of impact they want to have in their latter career. And so I was thinking about trying to replicate that model for outgoing members of Congress. But what I learned through conversations with former members was that the immediate imperative to find remunerative work actually affected how people made decisions related to departing Congress. And so the sort of breakthrough aha I had in conversation with a Mira coach was, okay, well, what if we, instead of trying to help people through an outbound pipeline to get somewhere that is going to pay them, what if we try to figure out a way to give them a safety net immediately and pay them immediately to do public service work that matters? And so then what I've been working on lately is about, okay, what could that work look like, and how can we set that up in a way that's going to make the most of their experience and skills to make a difference on the sort of vicious cycle of problems in our democracy. So that's been really inspiring, and credit to Kai and the Mira team for that.
I have one too. So one of the things that I didn't fully realize before starting Mira is that one of my fears is talking about money. And so my parents, I know it's funny, Lynn. My parents were academics, and so it was considered impolite to talk about money, or just sort of gauche to talk about money. And so the big aha was when one of the fellows said, look, no margin, no mission. And if you can't figure out a way to turn a profit it depends on how you're being funded, right? Because some people are funded by grants. In my case, that's not going to be the case. So in my case, it's absolutely true. My mission cannot be successful if I cannot create a sustainable change generator, and that requires money. And that was a breakthrough.
I'm so glad, Dart, that you found space to talk about that with the community too.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I guess on my end, well, there's been so many aha moments, Kenny, that I really honestly don't know what to pick. But so my background is as a much more technical role as an actuary. And so when I first came into the Mira Fellowship, so much of what I was trying to do was more of almost like a resource allocation operational question. And it was actually because of one of the tools that I think it might have been either Ko or Kai shared it with me, sort of like the idea behind an empathy interview and how do we kind of create space for people to share about more of like an emotional relationship with something that might have theoretically seemed a lot more objective. That we realized that there were, like what Dart was saying, that we don't necessarily talk about money and that there's so much of this emotional component to behind some of the conversations. And so so it was that on its own was probably the biggest aha, which was just how do we the fellows, the community members that took part in some of these early experiments that made it so that we now have more of this community-led approach to what the Money Health Collective is. And I don't think that if it weren't for this fellowship, I doubt that we would have been able to design it in this way that even this morning we were talking with some volunteers from the broader community that now sit across 4 different continents. And they were saying that I think it's because of that emotional piece that it feels like there's like a soul of this community that I think exists because of a lot of the tools that the Mirror Fellowship made available to tackle more of that emotional element and also the design element of how these different conversations come together. So thank you, Kenny, for the beautiful question.
Yes, I love that question. I see a question here from Elise. How many fellows are accepted to each cohort? So historically, it's been usually 4 to 6, so they're really small cohorts, with the intention of keeping it so that you really develop really deep relationships with your fellow cohort members, and also so that you're able to get a fair amount of hands-on support from the Mira Fellowship team and broader community. We are beginning to have what we're calling a coaching track too. So for some folks who the cohort idea is less necessary, so there may be a little more flexibility there in terms of those numbers, but in general, it's a pretty small acceptance each year. Let's see here. Oh.
Can I just jump in? How many applications do you usually get? Would you say if you accept 4 to 6, what percentage of your overall applicant base?
So it's pretty small. We tend to, I think it's about, last year I think it was like 4% or so. But we do try with anyone who doesn't get accepted. We've designed our application process for it to be to actually push all of your projects forward. So every question that we ask and everything we have people go through is meant to help you actually continue to develop your idea. So people who don't get in one year, we've also had people who don't get in one year and they apply again the next year because their idea has developed a bit more, and that's been a great opportunity as well. So Blaine, did you have something to add?
I'd love to just reflect that from the recent applicant perspective. That really came through very clearly for me in the application process. And I recall talking to my other friend who was applying at the time about, like, even if we don't wind up getting a fellowship, going through this exercise is going to be helpful to us. And so, like, there's really no regrets to doing that, because it's been helpful even so. So yeah, just want to echo that, Ko, from the applicant perspective.
That's great. What other questions do you all have, especially questions for these fellows? It's a They all have very varied experience at the fellowship, and they are amazing people. So any question that you can come up with, maybe not
I have
really.
a question.
Yeah.
And this is for like maybe any of them or all of them, right, at the same time. At what point did you feel like suddenly the Mira Fellowship was, the best thing that happened to you? Like, at what point did it actually click? Yeah.
Great question.
I can go first, perhaps. I mean, I think it's and I hope, Mark, you might feel a little bit even on this call today. But I think the intentionality that the program has, not just in terms of who, I remember that when we were going through the application process, it was honestly my first meeting, not just with the fellows who were ultimately selected, but also with the folks who were going through the application process as well. There was this beautiful finalist event that we were still actually all, it was during COVID. I don't know if Colin, I remember, but we were all like virtually trying to go through this like very intentionally, thoughtfully designed event. And I just remember coming off of that call thinking, like what Blaine was saying, that, even if, I don't end up becoming a fellow with this community, I have so loved this experience. And just how intentionally they designed the entire gathering so that we all felt like we were learning something, getting to know one another. I don't know if they still do this, but at the time they even sent each of us care packages to, to get us through the day with like the best like toasted almonds ever. So I think, and if you have a nut allergy, they're also very thoughtful about that too. So, so it's just the thoughtfulness with which they went through the process of bringing all of us together, asking these really creative questions to get us to move to the next level of whatever it is that we were trying to design. I haven't experienced that level of care towards community in any other space, especially at the time during COVID, how difficult it was to feel connected with one another. And they did that so expertly. And it's even cooler now getting a chance to see everyone in person and to see how those relationships have flourished. So hopefully that answers your question, Mark.
I was gonna see if Blaine you don't have your hand up. It was a pretty slow burn for me in the sense that it wasn't like aha moments exactly where I said, this is the thing. There were a couple of those, but mostly it was just a lot of work. And it was kind of more work than I had expected. And it was different kinds of work, which is there's intellectual work, but there's also emotional labor to figure out things and to break and to get through things. The kind of work though that progresses you. And so it's kind of the big thing for me was in the sum of that work that finally got me to a place where I could move forward differently. But it wasn't like any minute of the work. It wasn't during the work that I thought this is the thing for me. It was during the work, it was sort of like, it is a lot of work. But it was after the work that I realized that was the thing for me.
It resonates. Start. I'll just add maybe two moments that your question made me think of. Mark, I think it was. First was during the finalist process, the team gave us these post-it note holders. I don't know if you can see this, upon which we were supposed to write our North Star. And having this in sort of physical form on my desk, also in the finalist process, right? I wasn't a Mira fellow yet. It solidified for me in a way of like, oh, this is the thing that I am dedicated to. If I can create a world, even just by blabbing about this idea until somebody steals it, if I can create a world where this North Star is achieved, I will feel like I'll feel the satisfaction of having made a difference that I cared about. And having it on my desk that I look at every day, it makes a difference in how I do my work. And then I guess the other moment that your question made me think of was the that first convening of all the fellows where folks shared what they were working on and what stage they were in of bringing this thing into being. It made me see that I was surrounded by peers who were all grappling with how to make something real. And some people's things were starting to be real, like 3-dimensional, existing in the world, having clients. And it made me feel like, oh, okay, this is, it's not just a thing that is a dream in my head and a PowerPoint, but actually there's a path to get it to change people's lives. So yeah, those were the 2 moments for me.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing that. I see a question here. Hello, I'd like some advice for international applicants. How much background information would you like to see in the application? Any advice on how to not feel so vulnerable when sharing reflections and ideas I'm so passionate about through an online form? So the application lines out pretty well, like the level of detail that we want. If you're super excited and you want to talk to us, we're open to meeting with folks if they need to kind of talk through what to share, what not to share. If you end up in a situation, we had one person who was working on something that could be just like sensitive from if people connected her to the project, it may put her in a potentially dangerous situation. So we're happy to work with you in whatever way to encrypt things, to make it feel more safe. That being said, yeah, I guess if it feels like there's any risk, be sure that we can have it be a back and forth and we can figure that out. I'd say take a look at the application itself, because at the same time, the more clarity that we can get about who you are and what it is and why you're driven to do it, like from a more personal perspective, these projects do end up being kind of vulnerable, and the more you're able to sort of look at whatever the hard things are, the more you'll be able to move through them. So yes, anything to add, Kai or Blaine or Lynn or Dart?
Not for me. That covered it to me.
I could just add that my work is intentionally nonpartisan, but I think involves talking to people who are partisan, and that dynamic certainly comes up in conversations with people, and I think the Mira team has been very supportive and mindful of those sensitivities and discreet when it comes to those issues, as needed in context. So I was, Clara, like a little cautious in my application of how do I frame this in a way that's gonna be okay given those sensitivities, and I think the trust that I put in the Mira team has been fully validated, if that offers you any comfort.
Awesome. Thank you all. All right, another question for the fellows. What obstacles came up during the fellowship and how did you overcome them?
Super tactically, I have been trying to dedicate more time to this work while balancing like a need to also generate an income for myself. I know some startup incubators will say like you should quit your job so that you are hungry, like literally hungry, to make sure that your new idea succeeds, but that wasn't really financially feasible for me, and it's meant that I've done some part-time consulting work to pay rent and whatnot, and that I think has been still, that is an ongoing challenge that I grapple with in terms of really time boxing my paid work so that I can dedicate all the time that I want to the fellowship. And then of course, making sure to still do justice to my paid work, because I've been trying to do both, but I specifically have declined work that would click me up to like a full-time paid work, because this is my personal opinion, I won't speak for the Mira team, but I don't think that I could have taken full advantage of all that Mira has to offer if I were also working full-time, unless that full-time thing was extremely closely related to the Mira project somehow. my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up on that because that sort of should I work, should I not, etc., is a question that comes up for most people. And I would say I would just echo Blaine's. We can't pay you, so you're not. If you need to feed yourself, then absolutely feed yourself. We don't need you to be hungry, but physically hungry. But absolutely, you get out of it what you put in. And so, the more time you can give to it, the more you'll get out of the fellowship. And this fellow, like we have a lot to offer, and we've seen people take full advantage, and we've seen people miss getting to take full advantage because of other commitments. So.
I really deeply resonate with what Blaine shared, and also it reminds me of something that Dart said earlier on, which is that often we are afraid whether or not we're the right person to take on this challenge that we're looking to tackle. And I think a combination of like always being able to be distracted by other opportunities and work made it so that it was hard to necessarily like sit within myself and be like, this is actually the thing that I want to tackle and the thing that I know I can build. And like Dart mentioned, we don't want to give away some of the beautiful exercises and also the resources and gifts that the Mira Fellowship provides. But I've always carried with me. There's the beautiful plexiglass that Blaine mentioned, and also a number of these little from the Mira Fellowship experience. And something I think my coach, which is Kai, had said at the time, which was just like to the extent, you don't underestimate how much you are already the right person for what you're trying to build. And get more comfortable making other people uncomfortable. I don't know if Kai, you remember saying that to me. So I do remember that being like just such a big part where, I did my fellowship with the Mira Fellowship team my first year back in 2020 to 2021. And even though my idea was always sort of like growing in the background, it wasn't something that I was able to fully invest in myself in creating until really October of last year. And then since then, it's just been flourishing. So I think that's maybe something that for me too, I think it was at least your question. I think honestly, overcoming has just been with the strength of the relationships we built within this community and having people to talk to whenever it felt like it was too hard to keep pushing forward. So thank you also for the lovely question.
So I went to 20% at my job when I started. Well, not because of Mira at the same time as Mira, because I was structurally putting myself into a position where I could have enough money to get by and still push the project. There were probably two, like there's one big challenge, like a structural challenge in my life that it creates, which is that it competes for time with my wife. And she retired and I didn't. And so it's sort of like, it was just, it was kind of a surprise by how big a deal that was, that she had lots of free time and I didn't. And it was a choice of mine that I made to not have the time. And so we've reached equilibrium on that, and in a happy equilibrium. So that was good. One of the things is that I give a lot of talks. And so whenever I get invited to give a talk internationally, if it's a cool place, then she comes with me and we do fun things afterwards. Recently, I went to Washington, D.C. to help a Mira Fellow in January. And Elizabeth said, January, D.C.? No, that's not for me. So that's one thing. But for me, the center of this path has always been publishing a book. And that's just really hard because I don't want to self-publish it. I want it to be on a big press, and I get close. I've had real wins. I got an article into the Harvard Business Review, which at the beginning of Mira for me was like the perfect thing that could possibly happen would be I'd get an article in the Harvard Business Review. But then immediately, so how do I turn that into a book? And getting knocked down and having to get up from that over and over is just, that's hard. Super hard. I'm good at it because I was a fiction writer when I was younger, and I used to stack up the rejections. but it's still like, come on, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So I have a question here from Latifa, and then we'll go to Lila, and then we may have time for one or two more. Would love to hear from fellows as well, how far along they were with their idea/prototypes at the time of application.
I can chime in quickly. I would say I was at the phase of complaining to all my friends about the problem that I wanted to solve, and making a present, like trying to make my own sort of pitch deck presentations, and reaching out to like people in my network and my network of my network to like start having some conversations about this idea and get their feedback and try to meet my target audiences. So pretty early from my perspective, but welcome. Welcome others to chime.
I always think I'm done. Like, I've got this figured out, and my path is finding out that I don't have it all figured out. And so, so it's mostly been expansion for me. I mean, how baked was I really? There's a difference between having a baked idea and having a baked product and way to get the product into the world. And so I was very baked on the idea, although I've continued to learn a lot ever since. But there's just this huge distance between having an idea and having the infrastructure and the connections to turn it into reality.
I think for me it was an issue that I had been thinking about for maybe about a decade and tackling it in different ways. And actually, when I came to the fellowship, the way that I had been planning to address it ended up being completely different from what ended up being the outcome of the work. So, as I think Code mentioned earlier, if you have the commitment and a drive towards what it is that you're building, be very comfortable that it'll probably shift in different ways as you're going through the fellowship as well.
Lila.
Just tactical question for the story, because thank you for giving examples for the other questions, but for the video story, can it really be a story about anything, or should it pertain in the application process? Should it pertain to what idea and what we're?
So people do end up doing both. It is intended to be literally whatever. It's about, basically we're trying to understand like how you articulate yourself, how you show up. Some people do end up using it to tell about their project. You do not have to. It's kind of, we want to see who you are.
Yeah, I would second that. I think don't worry about it being something. It's almost more interesting if it's not about your project. There's a lot of stuff about your project.
We have a tactical question here in terms of how do fellows communicate? Is it mostly personal relationships, calls, or are there platforms, WhatsApp, Slack created for the conversations between fellows? So essentially we have some in-person time where people, and then we have some remote summits where you'll get to kind of collaborate, work on things for a few hours together. We have optional work hours that are open for people to literally just come, and you can come and work, or you can come and ask questions. And we have and then we have a WhatsApp group that we have a WhatsApp for like the new fellows who first come in, and then once you kind of have gone through what we call your base camp time, you join the broader fellowship, and you kind of have access to all the fellows from all different years in that WhatsApp group.
Can I ask just real quick, and is it a broad time range, if, with time differences and time zones, and when you try to meet up virtually?
Yes. So it depends. Each cohort depends on where you are. We had one year where we had someone in India and someone in Hong Kong and people on the East and West Coast. So that was a challenge. But we basically, we tried not to be too, we tried to just work with what the group ends up being. We've also had ones where everyone's within a 3-hour time change from each other, and it's not that challenging. So, but yeah, and then we do have a number of, we have in person, and that obviously people just come from wherever they're coming, and then we're all in person together. But we work with different time zones all the time. Any last question? Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Forever Fellows for being here tonight. Your input is always the most valuable part of all of this, so appreciate that. And please feel free to reach out if you have additional questions. And we look forward to seeing your application for those of you who feels like this is a good match. Have a wonderful
Thanks. Have a good
evening or
day.
morning or whatever time of day it is where you are.